This war is basically about the action and reaction of NATO pushing right up to the Russian border, which they promised they wouldn't do when Gorbachev negotiated the withdrawal of the USSR from the whole of Eastern Europe. He said, we will do this on one condition, that you don't come 1 inch closer to the Russian border than the eastern borders of Germany. And you lot, if I may include you in it as an American, agreed to that and said, sure.
Well, that's just plain bullshit. Gorbachev never said any such thing. There was no negotiations for the USSR's withdrawal from the whole of Eastern Europe. The USSR unexpectedly collapsed 2 years later, not a planned withdrawal. Waters is just referring to his buddy Putin's narrative that the West promised that NATO would not expand eastward. In 1990, when Gorbachev and James Baker were discussing the upcoming negotiations for the reunification of Germany, Baker said these words: "There would be no extension of NATO's jurisdiction for forces of NATO 1 inch to the east." And since then, Putin and his sycophants, like Roger Waters, have latched onto the words 1 inch.
And this was verbally promised and put in writing, was that NATO would not expand 1 inch to the east.
That you don't come 1 inch closer to...
And I've reiterated many times that you're well aware, not an inch eastwards. This is what we were promised. Not an inch eastwards.
That we would not move NATO 1 inch to the east.
That sentence was taken out of context from a much larger conversation. Baker is talking about the NATO forces currently in West Germany not moving eastward into East Germany. The whole conversation was about Germany, not Europe. And sure enough, the written agreement that came out of this was the Treaty of the Final Settlement with respect to Germany. Basically, the Russians would leave East Germany and, as per Article 5, Part 3, no foreign forces would be stationed in East Germany. To this day, over 30 years later, there are no foreign forces or NATO forces stationed in East Germany. The document says nothing about NATO expansion into Eastern Europe. But don't believe me, even Gorbachev agrees and called it a myth. So Roger Waters is again just parroting propaganda. But since we're on the subject of agreements, let's talk about the Budapest Memorandum. When the Soviet Union collapsed, Ukraine was free. But since the Soviets had so many nuclear weapons in Ukraine, it turned out Ukraine was now the third largest nuclear power in the world. To resolve this, Ukraine, Russia, America and the UK met in Budapest. The outcome was an agreement referred to as the Budapest Memorandum. In that, Ukraine would give all the nuclear weapons to Russia. In exchange, Russia agreed to respect the sovereignty of Ukraine and to never use weapons against Ukraine. So much for that agreement.
And if you don't know that, you're not reading enough. Go and read about it. Okay.
And what about the agreement called the NATO-Russia Founding Act? This video is from before the war.
If you're interested in this issue, I would encourage everyone to read the NATO-Russia Founding Act very carefully. And I actually helped negotiate it. It says that NATO will refrain from additional permanent stationing of substantial combat forces. When we recently agreed to deploy 4 battalions to the east of our alliance, we also agreed that they would be rotational, not permanent. Moreover, the total levels are well below any reasonable definition of substantial combat forces. Russia, which pledged to exercise similar restraint, has increased the numbers of its troops along our borders, and it has breached agreements which allow for verification and military transparency. So NATO has respected its commitments faithfully. Russia has not. By signing the Founding Act, Russia pledged not to threaten or use force against NATO allies in any other state. It has broken this commitment with the illegal annexation of Crimea, the territory of a sovereign state. And Russia continues to support militants in eastern Ukraine.
Maybe Roger Waters should keep his mouth shut when talking about agreements involving Russia. He's a celebrity who speaks with confidence and sounds knowledgeable, so it's easy for his sycophant followers to lap it up. Looks like he ended up being just another brick in the wall of Russian propaganda and he is comfortably numb to the truth. Thanks for watching, and if you like this video, please hit the like button and let me know what you think of Roger Waters in the comments.